Lionel Richie canceled his concert in Chicago tonight at the United Center after an onstage health scare during Wednesday night show in Minnesota.
Now we're hearing from fans who are worried about the Grammy winner's health.
Lionel Richie has spent nearly 50 years making people dance. So when the 77-year-old icon suddenly sat down mid-performance, told a stunned crowd he felt dizzy, and disappeared backstage into an ambulance, the silence that followed said almost as much as the moment itself. For 10 days, fans were left with nothing but a viral clip, a vague statement from his team, and a lot of unanswered questions. Then on July 4th, Richie finally spoke. But what he actually said might not be what you expect. Let's walk through exactly what happened and separate what's been confirmed from what's still just speculation. The night was supposed to be nothing but joy. On June 24th, Lionel Richie kicked off his Sing a Song All Night Long tour alongside Earth, Wind and Fire at the Grand Casino Arena in St. Paul, Minnesota. Just hours before the show, Richie posted on Instagram, clearly buzzing with excitement about opening night, sharing behind-the-scenes shots from rehearsal and soundcheck, radiating nothing but anticipation for the crowd waiting to see him. For the first hour, everything unfolded exactly as planned. Richie commanded the stage the way he always has. The audience sang along to hit after hit, and Earth, Wind and Fire brought their signature energy to the shared bill. Then came Dancing on the Ceiling, a song that is anything but slow, a high-energy number that usually has Richie moving across every inch of the stage. This time was different. Richie paused. He sat down on one of the stage platforms. And then, in a moment nobody watching had ever seen before, he sang the entire song from a seated position, something he reportedly had never done in the long performance history of that track. He didn't try to hide what was happening. In a clip that fans captured and quickly spread across social media, Richie leaned into the microphone and spoke directly to the crowd about what he was feeling in that moment. He told them plainly that when you're feeling dizzy, you sit down, and when something feels strange in your body, you listen to it. Then, almost as a way of easing the tension, he pointed out that this was the first time in the song's history he'd performed it sitting down and joked that it probably wasn't a good sign. The audience laughed along with him. His humor, as it so often does, smoothed over an uncomfortable moment. But nobody in that arena fully grasped how serious the situation was about to become. At first, the crowd's reaction mirrored Richie's own light tone. He spent decades putting audiences at ease even when something goes sideways on stage, and this felt, at least initially, like one of those moments. But as the song continued and he stayed seated, people in the crowd began exchanging glances. Phones came out. Quiet conversations started rippling through the arena. This wasn't part of the show, and people were starting to realize it. What made it so jarring was the contrast. This is a performer known for gliding across a stage with effortless control, someone whose whole persona is built on charisma and ease of movement. Watching him need to sit down felt completely out of character, and that dissonance is exactly what turned a strange moment into a genuinely worrying one. Shortly afterward, Richie moved to the piano and performed a seated rendition of 3 Times a Lady. Then he left the stage. Most fans assumed it was simply an early intermission. They had no idea that, behind the scenes, an ambulance had already been called. According to reporting from the Minnesota Star-Tribune, the crowd waited close to 40 minutes without any official explanation. During that gap, Earth, Wind and Fire saxophonist Dino Saldo stepped out to address the audience directly, letting them know that Richie wasn't feeling well and wouldn't be returning to finish the show. A concert that had been scheduled to run roughly 90 minutes ended after less than an hour. Backstage, things were moving quickly. Paramedics reportedly met Richie once he was off stage, and he was transported by ambulance to a nearby hospital. The St. Paul Fire Department later confirmed to Fox News Digital that an adult man had been taken from Grand Casino Arena to a local hospital by St. Paul Fire EMS that night. No further details about his condition were released publicly. Sources connected to Richie, cited by TMZ, described the hospital visit as a precautionary measure. That single word, precautionary, became one of the only concrete pieces of information available in those first chaotic hours. Everything else was left open to interpretation, and open interpretation is exactly the kind of vacuum that breeds speculation. It's worth pausing here to draw a clear line, because this is where a lot of coverage of celebrity health scares tend to go off the rails. Here's what was actually confirmed in the immediate aftermath. Richie told the crowd he felt dizzy and strange. He was taken to the hospital and kept there overnight as a precaution. His tour schedule was disrupted as a direct result. Here's what was not confirmed. Not by Richie, not by his team, not by any hospital official. An exact medical diagnosis. Nobody put a name to what caused the episode. That distinction didn't stop the practical fallout, though. Richie's team quickly announced that 2 upcoming shows, one at Chicago's United Center, another the Schottenstein Center in Columbus, Ohio, would be postponed on doctor's orders so he could rest and recover. The plan was for the tour to resume days later in Pittsburgh, contingent on his recovery holding up. It's worth sitting with what that decision actually meant logistically. Postponing 2 arena shows isn't a small call. It means refunding or rescheduling tickets for thousands of people, coordinating with 2 separate venues in 2 different cities, and pulling an entire touring production off the road on short notice. That's not the kind of decision a team makes over a minor stumble on stage. It's the kind of decision made when a doctor tells you to stop. Richie's team released a brief statement apologizing for the inconvenience to fans holding tickets for the 2 postponed shows, promising that rescheduled dates would be announced soon. Notably, the statement didn't mention a diagnosis, didn't reference test results, and didn't speculate on a cause. It was an apology and a promise, nothing more. In the days that followed, one explanation started circulating that a lot of fans latched onto as the real answer: dehydration. Earth, Wind and Fire drummer John Paris spoke to the Minnesota Star-Tribune and said Richie hadn't shown any signs of illness before the show. According to Paris, Richie later told him he'd felt a little dehydrated. On its face, that tracks. Dehydration is common on tour, especially for a performer in his 70s working night after night under hot stage lighting. It would explain the dizziness. It would explain needing to sit down. It could even explain a hospital visit taken purely as a precaution. But here's the problem with treating that explanation as the final word on what happened. It didn't come from Lionel Richie himself. It came secondhand from a bandmate relaying a private conversation. That's not nothing. Paris presumably has no reason to make it up, but it's also not the same as an artist going on record about his own diagnosis. There's a meaningful gap between what someone says a friend told them privately and what that person confirms publicly themselves. And as of the most recent reporting available at the time, Richie himself had never gone on record to confirm dehydration or anything else as the specific cause of the St. Paul episode. Multiple outlets, including Entertainment Now, explicitly noted that Richie hadn't shared what actually caused his hospitalization. That gap between a second-hand explanation and Richie's own public silence is exactly what lets speculation grow. Fan forums and comment sections filled with theories ranging from simple touring exhaustion to more serious concerns tied to his age, to broader questions about whether decades of physically demanding performances were catching up with him. None of those theories had anything solid behind them. They were guesses filling a space that Richie's team had left wide open. This is a familiar pattern. Honestly, it's not the first time an aging music legend has faced this exact cycle after a health scare, a frightening moment on stage, a vague explanation relayed through someone in the artist's circle, and then weeks of public guessing before the artist addresses it directly, if they ever do at all. Richie's situation was following that same well-worn script right up until July 4th. While Richie stayed quiet on social media, he didn't stay off the road for long. On June 30th, just 6 days after being rushed to the hospital, he returned to perform in Pittsburgh at PPG Paints Arena. For someone who had just gone through a public health scare in front of thousands of people, getting back on stage that quickly sent a message on its own, even without a single word of public explanation. From there, the tour kept moving. Richie performed in Detroit as well, seemingly picking up right where things had left off before St. Paul. But through all of it, he still hadn't directly addressed what happened, in his own words, to the fans who'd watched it unfold or seen the clips online. That changed on July 4th. Picture the scene in Pittsburgh that night. Just 6 days removed from being wheeled out of an arena in a completely different state, Richie walked back out under the lights in front of a new crowd, one that had almost certainly seen the viral footage from St. Paul before they ever bought their tickets. There was no dramatic speech about his recovery, no emotional thank you to a medical team delivered from the stage. By all accounts, he simply performed, joked with the audience, and moved forward, letting the act of showing up speak louder than any statement could have. That choice tells you something about how Richie chose to handle this from the very beginning. Rather than getting ahead of the story with a detailed explanation, he let his actions, showing up, performing, visibly being on the mend, do the talking instead. It's a strategy plenty of public figures use when they'd rather not turn a private health matter into a headline that follows them. Whether that reads as reassuring or frustrating probably depends on how much you feel entitled to know about a 77-year-old man's private medical business in the first place. So after nearly 2 weeks of public silence following a hospitalization that made national headlines, what did he actually say when he finally addressed it? On July 4th, exactly 10 days after the hospitalization, Richie posted for the first time about the whole ordeal. The tone was warm, grateful, and almost entirely focused on his fans rather than his own health. He thanked people for their messages and their kindness, said he was doing well, and expressed gratitude for the outpouring of support. He went on to talk about how much he'd enjoyed his return shows in Pittsburgh and Detroit, describing the energy of the crowds and the memories made, and told fans he was looking forward to seeing them in Toronto next. Read that statement closely, because what it includes matters just as much as what it leaves out. Richie confirmed he was recovering well. He confirmed his gratitude for the support he'd received. He confirmed that he was back on stage and back on tour. What he didn't do anywhere in that message was name a diagnosis. He didn't confirm dehydration as the cause. He didn't confirm any underlying condition. He didn't use the kind of blanket reassurance, simply saying he was fine, that celebrities often reach for when they want to shut a story down completely. Instead, he offered gratitude, and he offered proof of life through his continued performances, including, notably, joking on stage about the very moment that had sent him to the hospital in the first place. That combination of humor paired with vagueness has been consistent throughout this entire situation. He's willing to joke about feeling dizzy in front of a live audience. He's willing to publicly thank fans for their concern. But when it comes to the actual medical explanation behind what happened, he's kept that part entirely to himself. So does a warm, grateful social media post that never mentions an actual diagnosis really count as him finally addressing what happened? That depends on what you were expecting to hear. Based on everything reported by outlets including TMZ, Fox News Digital, the Minnesota Star-Tribune, and Entertainment Now, there is no credible reporting confirming that Lionel Richie revealed some specific, previously hidden diagnosis. There's no confirmation that he'd been concealing a serious illness that he has now admitted to publicly. That narrative simply isn't supported by what's actually been reported. What we can say, based on verified reporting, looks like this. Richie felt dizzy and strange during a concert. He was taken to the hospital as a precaution. He postponed 2 shows on doctor's orders. A bandmate said Richie described feeling dehydrated in a private conversation, though Richie has never confirmed that explanation himself. 10 days later, Richie thanked his fans and confirmed he was doing well and back on tour, without naming any specific cause for what happened. That's the difference between the dramatic version of this story and the version actually backed by reporting. The dramatic version writes itself easily. A beloved 77-year-old legend hiding a secret health battle behind his famous smile. But the version supported by the facts is more restrained and in some ways more reassuring. A scary moment on stage, a precautionary hospital stay, a short pause, and a return to performing within less than a week. Does that mean there's nothing more to the story? Not necessarily. Richie is 77 years old, performing physically demanding shows night after night on a lengthy tour. Whether dehydration was the complete explanation, a contributing factor, or simply the most convenient thing to tell a concerned bandmate in the moment is something only Richie and his medical team actually know, unless he chooses to share more in the future. The rest of us are left reading between the lines of a gracious, carefully worded thank you post. It's worth considering, too, why a performer in his position might choose to keep the specifics private, even from fans who clearly care about his well-being. At 77, still touring, still selling out arenas, and still building a career around joy and celebration, there's a real incentive to control the narrative around his own health. A single detailed medical statement can follow a performer for the rest of their career, shaping every headline and every ticket sale that comes after it. A short, grateful message that simply says he's doing well leaves far more room for Richie to keep being exactly what his fans want him to be. The man behind decades of hits, back on stage, and moving forward, rather than the subject of a cautionary tale about aging in the spotlight. That doesn't mean fans are wrong to want more information. It simply means that, based on everything verified so far, more information isn't something Richie has chosen to give. And until he does, every other explanation floating around online remains just that. An explanation, not a confirmed fact. So here's what we can say for certain. Lionel Richie scared his fans, spent a night in the hospital, paused his tour, and came back sooner than almost anyone expected, all without ever confirming the one detail everyone wanted most. Do you think Richie owes his fans a fuller explanation, or is his privacy about his own health exactly the way it should stay? Let us know what you think, and stick around for updates as this story develops.